Let's take a look at some of the clips out there of a few of these different contenders making the rounds on the mainstream media. We got a number of people that are in contention. Obviously, we've talked at length about Andy Beshear, Mark Kelly, but a bit of a dark horse, I would say, for Kamala's running mate is actually Tim Walz of Minnesota, someone that we have mentioned in the past on the Vanguard for various reasons.
Together,
quite progressive for a Democratic governor. It seems like he's accomplished a lot, and most importantly, has been just incredibly effective, right? So, let's take a look here. I think this guy seems to kind of hit all the different. He kind of scratches all the itches of a potential VP.
He checks a lot of boxes for sure. He's a small town guy. He says he's from a town of 400 people. His graduating class had 25 people in it. Half of them were cousins. He legalized marijuana. He's done a lot to shore up the infrastructure of Minnesota, and he's won the support of people who are not easy to win the support of, people like Governor Jesse Ventura. In fact, Tim Walz was the first person, I believe, to invite Governor Ventura back to the governor's mansion, since he left office. So anyway, this guy's a based dude, and I think you guys are going to appreciate what he has to say in this clip.
What I know is that people like JD Vance know nothing about small town America. My town had 400 people in it, 24 kids in my graduating class, 12 were cousins, and he gets it all wrong. It's not about hate. It's not about collapsing in. The golden rule there is mind your own damn business. Their policies are what destroyed rural America. They've divided us. They're in our exam rooms. They're telling us what books to read. And I think what Kamala Harris knows is bringing people together around the shared values, strong public schools, strong labor unions that create the middle class, healthcare that's affordable and accessible. Those are the things.
Also, I just want to remind everybody that horrible audio you're hearing in the background is actually not us that time. That's the high-paying gig at Morning Joe breathing very loudly into their microphone and shuffling papers. I just don't want you guys to blame that on me and Gavin.
You look what they're talking about. They went right to division. They did not give us a plan on health care. Donald Trump talked about infrastructure. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris built bridges, built roads. So I think this is going back to the bread and butter, getting away from this division. We do not like what has happened where we can't even go to Thanksgiving dinner with our uncle because you end up in some weird fight that is unnecessary. and I think bringing back people together, well, it's true. These guys are just weird. And it's, they're running for He-Man Women Haters Club or something. That's what they go at. That's not what people are interested in. And there is angst because robber barons like JD Vance and Donald Trump gutted the Midwest, told us we didn't do that. They talk about private schools. Where in the heck are you going to find a private school in a town of 400? Those are public schools. Those are great teachers that are out there making a difference and gave us an opportunity to succeed. That angst that JD Vance talks about in Hillbilly Elegy, none of my hillbilly cousins went to Yale, and none of them went on to be venture capitalists or whatever. It's not who people really are. So I think that message doesn't resonate. You saw it yesterday. The energy out here exploded. We all broke fundraising records, but that's not what I look at. Door knocks are full. Phone banks are full. People are talking about what's possible. We are finally on offense about an America where we're all together. So good. Have Orban down to Florida. The vice president will come out here and stand in a Planned Parenthood. She stands in a Planned Parenthood clinic in St. Paul. That's what people want to see. What I know is
I think Walz is, he's really good on the microphone, which isn't something I really knew about the guy. I knew he was a great governor. We've heard that from our friends in Minnesota. I know about his universal school lunch program, his, progress as it relates to cannabis. But I honestly didn't know that the dude was so slick on the mic. I mean,
he's a natural.
That was a really good appearance. He hit a lot of different points. None of it felt scripted. None of it felt cringy or overly rehearsed. He didn't really sound like it was a message that had been concocted in order to appeal to the right people. He was just talking, but making a lot of sense, roping policy in, but also making this pitch that the people on the other side are just fucking freaks. They're weirdos, man. And people don't want that. They don't want freaks and weirdos in charge. People that want to obsess over the fact that Kamala Harris doesn't have a child or whatever.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that he mentions about just being able to go back to a sense of normalcy in America is what he was articulating, right? People want to go to Thanksgiving and they want to talk to their uncle about the Royals or, what's going on in the 2024 Olympics and how many gold medals they think America is going to win, right? That's the kind of passive conversation that a lot of people look forward to with their families. How are your kids doing? Oh, he's struggling in math class. Hey, I did pretty good at math. Does he want to work on some of his homework with me? Now I'll throw the ball around with him outside. That's how family is supposed to function, right? It's not an intense debate debate about politics the second you sit down together. And I think that he wants to turn the temperature down when it comes to that. And I think that that's going to benefit the left because most people are normal. Most people aren't hateful, right? And the more volume you give to these right-wing idiots and the more seriously you take them, right? He just calls them freaks. He calls them dudes that are auditioning for the He-Man Woman Haters Club, like the little rascals. Like he totally infantilizes them. He totally makes a sidecar of them. And I think that's perfect. I've got one more from Tim Walz queued up for us, Gavin, because I think he makes another really excellent point here. Who turns out to vote more than anybody else in America by population, right? If you just are looking at critical demos, by and large, it's older, particularly white voters, but it's older individuals across all demographics. Tim Walz went on MSNBC to make the case for Harris to reach out to those voters and say that she must shore up support among, older electorate. Do you have any thoughts before we plow into this guy?
I mean, it's definitely true. That was the one demographic that Joe Biden actually did have on lock and was doing really well with. Obviously, that's not enough to win the general election, but it is true that that was the demographic that people were hoping could get Biden across the finish line. Just because, people of a similar age range related to his style of communication, his life story, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue for Harris, but she is younger. She's a Black woman. Obviously, some people of that generation might have a difficult time picturing a Black woman actually being the president of the United States. As weird as that sounds, it's not difficult for me to imagine, but for some people it is. So I'm interested to hear what Walz has to say here.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. That's what it comes down to. And don't, get sugarcoating this. These are weird ideas. Listen to them speak. Listen to how they talk about things. Listen to how your previous guests were right. Like you said, they've told them that they shouldn't talk about race. They can't help it. It is built into their DNA because there is no plan. There's no healthcare plan. There's no healthcare plan. There's nothing to do on this. They want to take away our alliances and leave Russia to do whatever they want. Look, they are bad on foreign policy. They are bad on the environment. They certainly have no healthcare plan. And they keep talking about the middle class that, as I said, a robber baron real estate guy and a venture capitalist trying to tell us they understand who we are. They don't know who we are. These are
base. I think that's a clear message that's appealing to everybody. My father could listen to that and be appealed. I think your grandfather could hear that. The guy who believed in Joe Biden and be attracted to it. Gavin and I, we were the most vicious, ardent, dyed-in-the-wool Bernie bros, right? I don't think that if you locked me and Tim Walz alone in a room together that we would have 100% policy agreement. But if I'm willing to come out and say, what is the American electorate looking for? What is the regular voter looking for? It's exactly what message this guy is proposing. And I think that's what makes him the perfect companion to a Harris candidacy, because there are just concerns about Kamala Harris, her likability on a national scale. That was something that we constantly criticized about her in 2020. The fact that she was a cop, right? The fact that she has a really terrible record as a prosecutor, the fact that she laughed off marijuana legalization, right, at a federal level. These are all massive concerns. If she's able to juxtapose herself with a guy that has true working class, true middle America bona fides like Tim Walz, I mean, there's no way to paint him as a radical, but I do think he will drag her to the left on issues that are critical, like housing, like infrastructure, like supporting labor unions, right? And I would be enthused by a choice of this guy by a meaningful margin more than anyone else, I think, at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Right now, as things stand, Tim Walz is my personal pick. If I was advising Kamala Harris, I would say go with this guy. He's the best communicator, and he actually has the policy record of achievements in Minnesota to back it up. I think you can't do much better than that, right? Being a charismatic communicator is very important, but pairing that with an actual record of achievement, that's the ultimate combination. I think he has it. Let's take a look over here at Andy Beshear. People have been talking a lot about Andy Beshear, and I do like Andy Beshear quite a lot. However, I think it is worth noting he definitely has some room to grow as far as a communicator, at least in my opinion. I found this CNN interview to be quite a bit more awkward than the two we just watched with Tim Walz. And he has some moments here. He definitely does. And I think that, like I said, he has a really good record as well. People in Kentucky like him quite a bit. But he seems a little bit more like a phony politician to me. Some of these kind of canned lines I don't think really hit in the way that he was hoping they would. And, Walz just seems like such a natural communicator. Nothing he said really sounded scripted to me. So let's take a look. Maybe you guys will disagree. And don't get me wrong, I still like Andy, but I think you guys are going to see what I'm saying.
He's stiff.
But the moment I win, I take that hat off and I try.
One second, let me raise the volume a little bit.
To serve every single Kentuckian. It's why I go to every part of the state, why we've created jobs everywhere, because there's not a Democratic or Republican job. There's just a community that need them and families that are improved by them.
Yeah, it sounds like you think you'd be able to help bring in some of those more moderate voters. But obviously, this race, if it shapes up the way it is looking right now, would be Harris and Trump at the top of the ticket. I want you to listen to what JD Vance said today, Senator JD Vance, at his first solo rally since he was named as Donald Trump's running mate.
This is not okay, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot for 3.5 years take a guy who clearly didn't have the mental capacity to do the job. Kamala Harris lied about it. My Senate Democratic colleagues lied about it. The media lied about it. Every single person who saw Joe Biden knew that he wasn't capable of doing the job. And for 3 years, they said nothing until he became political dead weight.
What's your reaction to that, Governor?
Well, first, he ought to call the vice president by her title. She earned it. She is Vice President Harris. But the second is they're grasping for straws. Listen, JD Vance is a phony. He's fake. I mean, he first says that Donald Trump is like Hitler, and now he's acting like he's Lincoln. I mean, the problem with JD Vance is he has no conviction, but I guess his running mate has 34.
Well, I'm glad you.
She was like, okay, thank you for that attempted comedy.
The thing is he looks like he's sweating bullets in this interview. He just doesn't seem comfy with the conversation. He doesn't seem comfy in front of a camera, really. And that is a political disaster when you're running for a national office. I think if you're running for governor, you can spend a lot of times shaking hands with individuals, making them comfy. I bet if you talk to Andy Beshear one-on-one, he makes you feel like the most special and important guy in the room, the whole world, and he makes you believe that he cares about you. And that's super effective and super important. But in the age of mass media that we're living in, you have to be polished on the mic. It reminds me of he's trying almost too hard to be like a Pete Buttigieg or like a Cory Booker or somebody who is polished on the mic but doesn't exactly say anything off the cuff.
Yeah, Cory Booker would have delivered that line a lot better, I think, the indictment line.
Exactly, but it would still come across as just a platitude, right? It would something he'd had canned, written for him by a speechwriter. It would feel very 1990s, very West Wing. And I don't think that's what Americans are looking for. And I think if you compare that directly to what we just saw from Tim Walz, is he was comfy. He was not intimidated on Morning Joe or whatever other show we watched him on in the other clip.
Not at all.
Was at ease. He was happy to share his vision for America, and he had a vision for America, and he could relate that vision to America to his already, accomplished checklist in Minnesota, right? As Gavin mentioned, universal lunch for children. That's a huge deal. If we could implement that on a national level, that would be something that I would be genuinely excited about as a socialist. Lunch debt should be a total oxymoron for children. You force them to be there. You feed them while you're there. Also, let's talk about how if we made school lunches universally free, people would actually have an incentive to make them shit not disgusting.
That's
right?
a great point. Yeah. I remember even in high school, Zach and I talk all the time about how good the school district that the public schools that we attended were. Even in high school, I remember sometimes kids that, came from less privileged backgrounds and stuff, I would just buy their lunch because they literally couldn't buy lunch. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes I wouldn't be hungry or whatever. I'd be like, yeah, just take my card. Dude, it's fine. But I was always like, this is crazy. How is this allowed? How is it possible that some kids are just not able to eat lunch at school when we're, like you said, all forced to be there?
On you or me taking an Adderall and being like, no, buddy, go ahead. Isn't that fucked up?
Yeah, it's genuinely crazy. So I think that Beshear, don't get me wrong, I think he definitely has room to grow. I think he could grow. I think that he's a better pick than someone like a Mark Kelly, who's just kind of the standard, predictable, boring a pick. Yeah, exactly. Didn't even support the PRO Act. I think on policy, Beshear is way better. According to Crystal, at least, he actually is really strong on unions. So I trust that. I do like Beshear. I think he has room to grow. The only other thing I'm a little bit worried about with Beshear, and we've already seen this attack start, to be previewed, especially by JD Vance, is that Beshear's from a political dynasty. Apparently his father was also governor of Kentucky back in the day. And so obviously the attack against him, especially from JD Vance, is I'm a real, I grew up poor and my parents were addicts. Your dad was the freaking governor who gave you a job. I'm a real Appalachian. You're just a Nepo baby, essentially, which is ridiculous because JD Vance is the biggest phony, the biggest fake out there when it comes to his
Donald
heritage.
Trump, a humongous Nepo baby.
Exactly. But I do kind of worry about that. It is undeniable. Andy Beshear is a Nepo baby, even though he's a good governor. So I'm like,
like Pritzker. And I did want to go ahead and contrast two of those individuals we were just taking a look at with what has been a disastrous pick for the vice presidency. I mean, maybe a Thomas Eagleton level disastrous pick.
Sarah Palin level.
Exactly. I mean, on a short list for some of the worst ever decisions made. And the American people have just immediately rejected this guy. Gavin, let's go ahead and take a look at this clip from over on CNN. Average since 2000 is a bump of plus 19. JD Vance lowest ever of minus 6 points. Ooh. Immediately after the convention. Do you have any thoughts before we hear from CNN?
I mean, what do people say? The first impression is the most important. It's very hard to undo a first impression. That's what JD Vance is looking at right now. And not just JD Vance, but the Donald Trump ticket, right? They're like, fuck, how are we going to undo this? We have how many months left to completely change people's mind about this guy after he totally flopped in his first impression and subsequent impression? We reacted to that hilarious, cringy, video of him trying to joke about Mountain Dew being racist, which totally bombed. I'm pretty sure the people in the audience immediately were able to sniff him out as a phony trying to be relatable. It was kind of like his Elizabeth Warren, I think I'm going to have a beer moment.
I'll have me a beer.
It's like, no one believes Elizabeth Warren is drinking a fucking Miller High Life or what was it, a Michelob Ultra or something?
Michelob Ultra.
Yeah, in the same way, no one believes that JD Vance is drinking a fucking Diet Mountain Dew. Are you kidding me? You're trying to appeal to the same Appalachian folks who you fucking smeared in your book and actually ironically brought up Mountain Dew as a reason why they aren't healthy and they feed their babies Mountain Dew and repeated all these stupid talking points that our friend of the show Zaina Day, who actually is from Kentucky, told us about.
100%.
It's a negative net territory. Look at that, negative 6 points. I will tell you, Aaron, I have gone all the way back since 1980. He is the first guy after immediately following a convention, a VP pick, who actually had a net negative favorable rating. That is underwater. The average since 2000 is plus 19 points. JD Vance making history in the completely wrong way.
I mean, it's amazing. Plus 19. And I know people talk VPs don't usually matter, but they're usually
they're
not
pretty popular. Usually they're popular. In this case, he's dragging Trump down.
All right.
And that's so true. Normally, when you have a functioning brain and you're not just warped and delusional about who you can get to kiss your ass the hardest when you're in office, you'll pick somebody that is going to be not an individual that outperforms you, overshadows you. You're going to take somebody who enhances you, right? Like you want the yin to your yang. You don't want two yins or two yang. You've got two yangs. You've got Yang and Diet Yang, not Andrew, but Donald and JD in this instance, right? And they're just hitting the same notes over and over. And people don't like JD doing it the way they like it when Donald does it. And we've seen time and time again, nobody likes it when anybody but Donald tries to do this whole shtick. When Ron DeSantis tried to do it, it was an absolute disaster, right? Every time we've seen a Republican who's not just batshit crazy like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Carrie Lake come out here and try and do like the MAGA impressions and try and, talk freely on the mic. I mean, even the Matt Gaetz guys that have been successful as like in the armpit of MAGA, they don't do that. They don't present themselves in the same way as Don because it makes them really unlikable because they don't have the Riz. Unfortunately, with his own base, he has Riz still. In 2016, he had it with a lot amount of people. Now it's dwindling.
JD?
No, I was going to say Donald.
Oh,
JD's never had any Riz. JD's been Rizless from jump, all right? And even though he's on his, I've been calling him the Ku Klux Care Bear. I think that's kind of the best way to describe his arc. That's not popular with the American people. I made the Thomas Eagleton reference, but that guy got busted for being treated with electric shock therapy. JD Vance is just a fat idiot bastard.
Yeah. And it's also super funny because it's very clear that JD Vance is actually trying to, in a very self-conscious way, come off as more likable than he actually is. He's basically playing a character right now out there on the campaign trail. If you guys take a look back 2 years ago, check out JD Vance on Tucker Carlson or something. there you will get to see the real JD Vance, right? And don't get me wrong, he's still incredibly unlikable, but at least you can actually tell he's being himself. He's not like playing a character. Right now, when he's on the campaign trail with Trump, he knows that he's too fringe. He knows that he doesn't add anything to the ticket, and in fact, he only compounds the worst and most repellent aspects of the Trump ticket. So now he's just making it worse by trying to be someone who he's actually not, which is this goofy, likable, affable, kind of Midwestern dad or whatever. And it's super goofy and it's not working at all. And I don't know which would be worse, if he just was himself or if he, continues to play this really cringy character. But yeah, it's making for an absolutely disastrous pick for Trump's running mate. I imagine that Trump is knee deep in regret already.